Women are powerful creators. The Align Women podcast features female entrepreneurs, leaders, and other professional women who've demonstrated agency and innovation in their personal and professional lives. I'm your host, Amy Evans. I have authentic, intimate conversations with my guests that highlight their paths to success, their struggles and accomplishments, and the things that currently excite, motivate, and inspire them to turn their visions into reality. Welcome to the Align Women podcast. I'm Amy Evans, your host and the founder of Align Women, a leadership and networking organization for professional women. This podcast features female entrepreneurs, leaders, and other professional women who've demonstrated agency and innovation in their personal and professional lives. And with me today is Nicole Cheri Oden. Nicole's an attorney who has a virtual law practice that provides family law services, and she also supports women who are starting online businesses and need basic legal protection. In addition, she's a member of one of my Align Women networking masterminds, and I'm really excited to have her on the show today. Welcome, Nicole.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Let's jump into what you do because it's fascinating, and you fall under the category of women with whom I get to have really fun conversations about things that didn't exist and you saw a need for them and so you created them. So tell me about your law practice. Let's start there. You have a very, what's considered non-traditional practice. Explain to me what that means and how you developed it.
Yeah, so I think that when people hear the word attorney, it's kind of this very stereotypical view that pops into their head. It's probably somebody stuffy. It's typically an older white male. And I think that a lot of people find lawyers intimidating and scary unless they have an attorney in their family, and then it's kind of something that they relate to a bit more. And that's kind of the image that I grew up with. Neither of my parents got their college degrees. Neither of them are entrepreneurs. But my dad from an early age was telling me I was going to be an attorney. Like, that's just something he always told me, and I always fought against it, and I ended up becoming an attorney. But I kind of took that traditional path. You go to law school, you get the job with the big firm, you do your internship while you're in law school. It's just, there's like a very clear path that you take if you want to be that quote unquote successful female attorney. And I was on that path, and I do love what I do. And I enjoyed working for my previous firm. 12 to 14-hour days were normal, and it was just kind of, it's what you did if you wanted to succeed and have a booming practice. And then I had my daughter. And it just didn't work. That type of, you have to be in the office all the time, on call for your clients all the time. And in family law, there is a little bit of blurred lines. Clients do need you, they do need insight, and they do need to have some flexibility in communication. But trying to juggle that with a 3-month-old at home, it didn't jive. And so I just saw a need to build a practice that I had more flexibility and say in my schedule, but that still worked for my clients. And my kind of key population that I work with tends to be the millennials. So, they were born between 1981 and I think it's like 1996 is kind of the age gap. And they're technologically savvy. They probably had parents that went through really shitty divorces, and they saw the kind of underbelly of the divorce process and how ugly it can be. And so if they're going through this process now, they don't want it to look like that. They want it to be easier and more streamlined and not as ugly and not as that War of the Roses type divorce. So I started my own practice. My daughter was 3 months old, and I kind of went out on my own. I knew that I needed to build something that worked, and the virtual law firm model was what worked. It allows me to have that flexibility for my clients and for myself. And I think that when you have kind of that less traditional, we can hop on a Zoom call, we can hop on a phone. You don't have to come into that intimidating, stuffy lawyer's office. It just makes the process seem a little bit more friendly. And it's easier for me to pick up the phone, or if I'm out and about and I need to hop on a Zoom call, there's just so much more flexibility for me and my clients, and it works. And it's just been something that I've enjoyed doing, and building this practice kind of around my life and building the lifestyle business, which has always kind of been my goal, has been a really fun process.
Yeah. And have you seen that the pandemic and sort of the forced nature of doing business virtually has that helped your business? Were you already there? Have you had people who maybe resisted the way you were doing things be more open to it now because of the environment that we're in?
Yeah, I think it's funny because a lot of people kind of knew this technology existed, this kind of virtual meeting and the phone calls and, being able to telecommute. But for a lot of them, it was just not the traditional, it's not the normal, it's not the expected and the accepted. And so it was something that they typically didn't want to kind of consider. And now they're being forced to consider this type of technology, and they're seeing how better it can be. You're not having to travel into the office and waste all this money on gas, and you can hop on a call quickly. Yeah. So it's been interesting because I've had clients reach out that probably wouldn't have before. So it's definitely opened up a wider client base. I've had a lot of attorneys reach out, which has been really interesting. Just people sending me emails through my website saying, I love the way that you built this, thank you for being a pioneer and kind of showing us what can be done. And that's been fun to get those types of emails, because I didn't see that when I was building my firm. It was just something that I kind of wanted to do, and I just went with it, and I was lucky enough that it worked. And so it's nice to be able to kind of be a mentor for others.
For sure. And maybe that is concurrent business number 3 for you, because we're about to talk to concurrent business number 2, but maybe concurrent business number 3 is acting as a consultant to other attorneys who think that this is a valuable business model. And in so many ways, it makes you, like you said, more available. It probably makes you more willing to work a little bit outside of what are normal business hours because you have more freedom with your time. It probably makes you much more accessible, like from a personality perspective, just much more of a real, down-to-earth, accessible, like you said, not stuffy in an office person. And the overhead when you do it virtually is a lot less than the expectation of that sort of Century City high-rise mahogany table office. So I imagine that you could probably do some consulting with some other attorneys and help them to move to a virtual platform as well.
Yeah. And I think it's cool because that whole concept of less overhead, it's true. So it actually benefits your clients because you're able to offer more competitive fee structures, but they're still getting that high quality service. So it's kind of a win-win for both of you.
Exactly. And one of the pieces of what you do, because we've talked about it previously, is you work on much more of and you'll be able to put it better than I do, but instead of a big retainer for a giant project with a high dollar amount where then you're docking hours from that giant fee, you work on much more of I would use the term piecemeal basis. It may not be the right term, but that the flexibility of your business model allows you to do that as well, right?
Yeah. So it's been fun for me to kind of embrace the limited scope or unbundled legal services type model, because again, kind of that traditional view of divorce is you go hire this pit bull divorce attorney and you're going to pay a $20,000 retainer and end up spending, upwards of $100,000 in legal fees. And sometimes that's per side, depending on how litigious you guys are. That's not something that the typical everyday family can afford. Sure. And I think that families are getting more savvy and understanding that they would rather retain some of that wealth for themselves and for their kids. I mean, there's legacy planning that comes into play, and they would rather perhaps work through some of the issues with their spouse and try and see if they can come to some sort of agreement, and then have an attorney come in and perhaps handle an aspect of the case, be that a single issue like trying to help mediate child custody or support or property division, or even if it's just, hey, we've come to an agreement, we need somebody that can draft the marital settlement agreement, so we can make sure we're not just hiring a drafting service that's not necessarily sure about the laws that come into play. We want to make sure it's done right the first time and kind of help us to make sure that this judgment's entered. So I can come in, and it is like an a la carte service. We can talk about what makes the most sense, and it does end up being less cost to you, and you're more in control of your case.
Yep. And had I known you when I went through my divorce a few years ago, you would have been exactly the type of person that I hired. And I went through a situation that you described. There was no property. There were no children. We were amicable in that we agreed in the division of the assets. And we hired an attorney to, like you said, review the agreement, make sure that all the I's were dotted and the T's were crossed, that it was fair, that it was reasonable, that it got filed properly. And that was a huge load off my mind. I didn't want to do it by myself, but I also didn't want to hire an attorney to represent me, forcing him to hire an attorney to represent him, and then have it by its nature at least feel more contentious than it needed to be. And I wasn't aware until I went through that process that even existed, that was even an opportunity for me. So now that I'm aware of it, having gone through it, and now, of course, that I have you in my network, it's wonderful to be able to share with other people who, probably don't expect to go through divorce like I did. I mean, it's not like I was researching the options prior to having to be in the situation. So it's good to know that there's flexibility beyond that, like you described, War of the Roses situation.
Yeah. And I think that mentality is it's ugly. People don't want to talk about divorce. It's very stigmatized still. And I think we're coming around. I think the fact that there are so many process options now that allow you to have flexibility and be in control of the process, from mediation to collaborative law divorce, or even cooperative law, which is a huge push that I see in Ventura and LA counties, where the parties may have attorneys to represent them, but the focus is really on negotiating a resolution. And you have court as an option if you get to a stalemate, but the focus really is trying to get this family through the process as unscathed as possible, and just being able to draft up the documents and send them on their way. So definitely my kind of little soapbox that I stand on for my law firm is just getting the word out there that it doesn't have to be this ugly 5-year drawn out $200,000 divorce that most people have in mind when they kind of hear the word. Yeah,
I join you on that soapbox. So let's talk about the other business that you run and how that came about. Family law is the first business, and that has a lot to do with the coming together and the coming apart of marriages. Mm-hmm. And then you also help women who are establishing online businesses and helping to provide them with the basic legal foundation for doing that. And so tell me about how you got there, and also tell me what a common mistake is that you see people making when they set up an online business.
Yeah, so it was kind of this, while I was in the process of leaving my old firm and going out on my own and kind of finding my own voice, I guess, in terms of my law practice, I kind of stumbled into the online space. I had a girlfriend reach out to me, and she was doing an MLM at the time. And so I ended up signing up with the MLM, and it's still one that I use for my own health and wellness today, but it wasn't a business model for me that kind of fit in. It wasn't something I wanted to pursue, but in kind of finding this online space, I would have people that I was kind of messaging with and talking with find out I was an attorney. And so I would start getting private messages about, hey, I have this question about a contract, or hey, I'm trying to decide if I want to form an LLC or if I should incorporate. And so all these questions, and my response would be, you really do need to chat with an attorney in your area. You want to make sure you're taking those right steps for you and your business. And I would get this response like, it's too expensive. It's overwhelming. Can you just answer a couple of questions? And it was kind of like that light bulb in my head went off. There is this need to make sure at least the basics are getting handled, that they're set up on a solid foundation. They're not ready to go maybe hire the small business attorney for everything and pay the big retainer, but they need something in kind of that 0 to first 5 years of their business. And so I launched my legal template shop online, and I started offering legal templates basically for people who are online service providers, just so they have something in place. So they get their website policies, like your legally required privacy policy and your terms and conditions, which are kind of the rules of the road for the people who visit your website. Your client agreement. I have a lot of coaches in the online space, virtual assistants, online business managers, those types of things. But they were working with clients without even having a contract. And so they'd have an issue arise. And I think this is the biggest issue that I do see come up, is they'd have something come up and they're like, well, how the heck do I deal with this? Because they hadn't thought about that kind of what if scenario. And I think as a business owner, you're going to face an issue at some point. It's not if, it's when. And so if you're not preparing for that, you're kind of putting yourself at a disadvantage, because you can't put legal protections in place after the fact. So you'll have an issue, And then you're stuck paying thousands of dollars, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on what it is. And then you get the legal protection in place and you're good going forward. So I'm trying to kind of help them alleviate that in between point where they get the, oh shit, something's messed up. How do I clean this up now? By having, and in my soapbox for my online business is just having written contracts. You know, a written contract is the best thing that you can do for your business in my eyes and in my opinion. And just consulting with an attorney. That's kind of my role, is to get in and we chat about what it looks like as your business starts to grow. And I work with other attorneys and I can hand them off when it comes time to incorporate, when it comes time for those bigger steps. But I like helping kind of those beginning business owners. It's been fun. It's been a good kind of juxtaposition between the family law and the burgeoning business owners.
I love it. I love it. So let's shift gears. Mm-hmm. One of my favorite questions for the women in my circle is, especially if you're in a male-driven industry, which I would say law is, although given that you run your own firm, it's sort of not that stuffy picture that you painted at the beginning of our conversation. That I love to ask women if you're in your masculine for most of the day, how do you return to your feminine? And you mentioned that you have a morning routine that is sacred to you. And I would love to hear about that. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So my morning really sets the tone for my day. I would find that, especially when I was working with my old firm, I would be up and like checking emails and responding by like 6 a.m. and I wouldn't shut off. And then you look back at your day and it's like, well, what the hell did I accomplish? What did I even do to carve out time for myself? You kind of just get lost in the hustle and bustle. And some of that continued on into having my daughter. So it was serving my clients and then it was serving my daughter and my husband. And again, where am I carving out this time for myself? And so early on after having my daughter, I was battling with postpartum anxiety. And so that's kind of where the shift into the online space with the health and wellness company came in. And I think my biggest kind of aha was kind of stumbling into the personal development industry. And I read a book called Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod, and I refer that book to everybody. I think it's an amazing way to kind of segue into the personal development space. And it's a practice that I've had now for almost 4 years. So kind of getting up, I am very kind of, I guess I have a routine. So I wake up, I sit down, I journal. I'm very into a gratitude practice. So I write my 5 things that I'm grateful for. I write down kind of my affirmations, my goals, and I've kind of mapped it out. So I have short-term goals and 5-year and 10-year goals. And so for me, it's just kind of visualizing. I meditate for about 20 minutes and then I exercise. And then I just feel like I'm on for the day. I'm in a good place. And if I don't get that in, my day just feels off. Mm-hmm. My daughter wakes up at like 5 a.m. sometimes. She's an early riser like I am. And so I've kind of learned to incorporate her into it. And so it's been kind of fun. She has her own journal. So she'll sit and doodle with me while I'm journaling. I have videos from when she was like 1.5 of her like exercising with me. So that's kind of, those are fun memories. But yeah, so it's just, that's my way of carving out time for me, making sure I'm taking care of myself, because I have learned that if I'm not taking care of myself, I can't take care of my family and my clients. And so
for sure,
I have to make sure that gets done.
So logical and still so difficult to implement. I love the way that you incorporate your daughter into it, though. That seems healthy, and that seems like a beautiful modeling behavior for her. So not only are you taking care of yourself in reality using what's around you, but also you're teaching her how valuable it is to take that time. And I'm sure some version of that practice will stick with her, and that's super cool.
Yeah, no, it's fun, but I'm also praying for the days that she sleeps in until like 8 a.m. and complains about having to get up.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, it sounds so adorable, like, if we're an Instagram moment, but the reality of it is probably a little more to juggle. Yeah. So let's talk about another question I love to ask. One of the hardest lessons that you've had to learn. And you said listening to my voice. And I'm assuming that means listening to your voice over other people's voices. So how did you realize that you were listening to other people's voices more than yours? And how did you learn to listen more to yours?
Yeah. So when I left my old firm, it wasn't a pretty picture. My partner was very angry about me leaving because I kind of just gave 2 weeks notice. Like I was trying to figure out what I was doing and where I was going and what I was going to build for myself and be present for my daughter. And so I think taking that with me as I was building my practice, I kind of heard in my head just kind of that disapproving, like, this isn't how it's done type view. And so I kind of struggled with, well, do I build it for what's making me happy and what I want to pursue, or do I build it because it's just how things are done and it's like a validated model? And so I didn't even launch my virtual law firm's website until this past year. Everything was done by referrals. And I still do contract work. I do contract work with 2 female-owned family law firms. I work with them still. And so it was just like, it was enough. I built this business, it was getting by, but I wasn't fully owning this business that I set out to build. Yeah. And so it's funny because I had set this launch for my website and then kind of COVID came. And so it's like I had my launch and then COVID. So it was like concept validation at like the perfect time.
Right.
So it's been fun to be able to amp that up and start to kind of pull away from some of the contract stuff and really step into working with my clients. And in the meantime, my online business has been growing like crazy because everybody's starting online businesses. So it's been kind of this fun, you kind of find your own voice and you just take that leap and hope that it works. And I've been lucky to where it's worked and it's just grown. And, choosing to just follow my heart and my gut and kind of just quiet the naysayers and quiet everybody's opinions, you can take it for what it's worth and just know that you have to trust yourself. And whether you succeed or you fail, it's your success and your failure, and it's what you do with it after, I think, that matters the most. So
yeah, I love that. I love your spirit, your entrepreneurial spirit. And we've just come up with not that I think we just came up with it. I'm sure it was in your head before, but we came up with a third business model for you. So, let's see what happens a year from now.
It could happen.
It could happen. So where can people find you if they're interested in reaching out to you for your family law practice or for your online business services?
Yeah, so my family and contract law practice is at NicoleStreetOdenLaw.com, and you can book consults there. So I work with businesses that are based in California for custom contracts and policies in that practice, as well as my family law practice. And then if you are a US-based entrepreneur and you know that you need to get some contracts in place, but maybe you're not necessarily ready to hire an attorney, you can head to NicoleStreetOden.com, and I have my legal shop there, and you can snag a legal template.
Perfect. And we will have all those links listed down below so that people can reach out to you. Thank you so much for being a guest today on the Align Women podcast, Nicole. I really appreciate it. I really enjoyed our conversation. It's
always fun chatting with you. Thanks for having me.
And look for more episodes with more amazing women at alignwomenpodcast.com. Thanks for listening to the Align Women podcast. You can find more episodes with more amazing women at alignwomenpodcast.com and visit alignwomen.org to learn more about our leadership and networking organization. This is Amy Evans, and you've been listening to the Align Women podcast.